It is a great privilege to welcome a distinguished leader at Montsema Mongolian National News Agency, whose work bridges global policy, local innovation, and urgent action. Dr. Muralee Thummarukudy currently serves as director of the G20 Global Land Initiative, based at the headquarters of the United Nations in Bonn, Germany. With over 3 decades of experience in both the United Nations and the private sector, he is internationally recognized for his leadership in disaster risk reduction and environmental recovery across some of the world's most complex emergencies, including tsunamis, earthquakes, floods, and conflict zones. Dr. Thummarukudy is known not only for his practical, field-based expertise, but also for his ability to communicate complex challenges in a way that inspires inclusive, solutions-oriented dialogue. His commitment to connecting global frameworks with community-level action continues to shape international approaches to resilience, restoration, and sustainability. Thank you for joining us here at Montsema News Agency.
Thank you for having me.
Let's begin with a broader view of the G20 Global Land Initiative itself. Could you please tell us what is the G20 Global Land Initiative and what inspired it? Is there an interesting story behind how it came about?
The G20, as you know, is a group of 20 members, 19 countries and the European Union, and they meet every year. And in 2020, they met in Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia had already decided land degradation as a major challenge on which they would like to act on. So they had created 3 projects, one for Saudi government called the Saudi Green Initiative, one for the Middle East region called the Middle East Green Initiative. So on the cap of it, they wanted a global initiative on land restoration. So they proposed this to the G20 leaders who accepted that as a global challenge. So the G20 leaders who met during COVID, so the meeting was virtual, but they agreed to a very ambitious target of 50% reduction in degraded land by 2040, which is restoring land equivalent to the size of China in 20 years. So that's a quite remarkable achievement if we manage to do it. And that's the commitment that the G20 leaders have made in 2020.
Bringing the conversation closer to Mongolia's role, how do you see the country positioned in this global landscape? In your view, what significance does Mongolia hold in the global land agenda?
Mongolia, as you know, is a very big country from a size point of view, even though the number of people are comparatively less. Over 160 million hectares of land, 76% of that showing some signs of degradation, I was told, of desertification or land degradation. But Mongolia is also a country which is heavily dependent on its land because livestock and agriculture is and used to be the core of its economy. Luckily, it's shifting, but it used to be at the core of its economy. So it is very important for Mongolia to be conscious about the issues of land degradation so that its economy is not affected in future. This is the reason why Mongolia is so proactive in looking at this problem, and we at the Global Land Initiative and the UN Convention to Combat Desertification is always happy to support.
Let's build on that idea of Mongolia's role, especially in relation to global challenges and platforms like COP. Do you think Mongolia can serve as a model for other landlocked and drought-vulnerable countries, especially at platforms like COP17?
Mongolia has decided to host the Conference of Parties of the UN Convention to Combat Desertification. This is a very significant decision for a country like Mongolia. It's a major undertaking. There are 197 parties to the UN Convention to Combat Desertification. there will be thousands of delegates coming from these countries. In addition to delegates, there will be other academia, industry, journalists. So major undertaking which has to happen. And Mongolia has to, on one side, do all the logistics of the preparation, but also be prepared, be supporting the negotiation of a new agenda. How the drought issues will be addressed, how are the issues of land degradation going to be addressed. But more importantly, Mongolia is using this as an opportunity to project rangeland as a key issue on global agenda. And this comes at an ideal time because 2025 to 2035 has been declared as the 2026 to 2036 has been declared as a decade for rangelands. So the decade coming in, Mongolia taking rangeland as a priority on this one, on this COP, I think that is going to bring a critical mass of action and attention on rangelands. And there are many other countries, both landlocked as well as non-landlocked, but where rangeland is a critical priority. Mongolia COP will be a turning point, and Mongolia is leading the way.
Inspiring models often come from unexpected places. From your vantage point, what are some hidden champions, whether that be countries or communities, within the G20 that may be inspiring for thousands of youth in Mongolia?
When we started our G20 Global Land Initiative, we wanted to look at the role of private sector in land restoration. How can private sector be motivated to restore land? Is there a business case for land restoration? Could we actually make money while doing land restoration? In taking this further, we were inquiring, are there young people who is working on the question of land restoration? Young people everywhere these days want to do startups. So they are doing startups on artificial intelligence, mobile applications development, robotics. But is a topic like land restoration something which they would be interested in? And we actually did a global call out for people who do that. And surprisingly, we got a very good response. So over the last 2 years, we have been building cohorts of young people who have set up business of land restoration. We have Musharul Aslam in Bangladesh, who is doing Internet of Things on agricultural land to monitor the nutrients in the soil, and that is then used to optimally apply fertilizer. We have a colleague in somewhere in southern Africa, where they are using composting as a way of promoting land restoration. We have a colleague in Ghana who is doing land restoration. So we are seeing this type of examples of young people, new generation, taking ownership of land, doing startup, making a profit, employing other people, but still serving our broad objective of better land management. Clearly, Mongolia, I understand, is a country of young people. More than 60% of the people here are young, I understand. It's a very growing population. So here also, young people are looking to do startups and they're looking for jobs. And with such vast amount of land, there is opportunity to create employment and enterprise in the domain of land. That's what I hope Mongolia can take inspiration from.
Now, on to the next question. Thinking about global spaces like COP, they're often seen as negotiation heavy and highly technical platforms. Based on your experience across previous UNCCD COPs, what approaches or actions have proven effective in making COPs more interactive, more inclusive, and accessible, especially for youth and the broader community?
Thank you. And I'm very happy that you asked this question. Last year, I went to Colombia for the Conference of Parties of the Convention for Biological Diversity. And I arrived there, it is in a city called Cali. So I arrived there around 8 o'clock. And so I went to a hotel and I checked in. It was very noisy. It was like people playing music and dancing and everything. So I asked my host as to, is this some sort of a local festival going on? And he said, no, it will finish by 10 o'clock. Now, for the reason you mentioned, that Conference of Parties is often a very negotiation heavy, diplomats heavy, local community has no action. Increasingly, they have started creating what is called a green zone. So the blue zone is a space where all this negotiation happen. But then they create a green zone where community can act, etc. But normally this is side by side. You have the blue zone and the green zone. So next morning, I went to the meeting and very formal, as you said, very access control, etc. So, and I asked them, where is the green zone? Then they showed me the map. So what they did there was to do the green zone in the heart of the city. So where I was staying was actually in the green zone. And all the music and the dance and everything which was ongoing was part of the COP. So it was not a COP which was happening somewhere else and the youth doing something else. The youth were inside it, creating their own momentum, discussing the topic, but in their own language. They're using music as a tool to communicate. They were using art as a tool to communicate. They were creating exhibitions on this. I think that's probably the best model, that it should not be confined to the boundaries of a secure space where access is controlled and limited. To the contrary, that procedural thing should happen, but you should also concurrently have space for young people, not only from Mongolia, but from around the world, to come and talk about the topic. And there should be a way of connecting between the two dialogues.
Thank you. Moving on to implementation. From your experience working across continents, what are some of the biggest successes and common pitfalls you've seen in large-scale tree planting and land restoration efforts?
I think when there is a good legislative background for land restoration, that happens more effectively. When there is good technical capacity, that restoration happens more effectively. But if only one of these is present, then you generally have a problem. If there's a legislation asking for restoration, but there's no technical capacity, then the restoration goes wrong, because you have trees planted at the wrong place, you have the wrong trees planted, you have invasive species planted in the middle of an area which is adjacent to forest, and then it degrades the forest. So when you think of large-scale restoration, you have to be very conscious about what intervention are you doing. We have also noticed that when restoration is just seen as a tree planting activity, that's also not very effective. We ought to think as to what is that we are trying to achieve. Are we trying to change the landscape? Are we trying to influence the community? Are we trying to change the livelihood of the community itself? And all of that would affect the type of restoration ideas you have. And I have seen both good and bad practices of both.
On the subject of inspiration, we are witnessing a growing movement among young Mongolians and civil society actors committed to protecting and restoring land. What are some of the best ways they can participate in or even lead national campaigns like the Billions of Trees movement?
I'm very happy that the young people here are actively engaged in land restoration. As I mentioned, Mongolia is a very vast country, but I understand majority of the people are living inside the cities, which means that they are not connected to the land in a direct way because they don't see the connection between their day-to-day life, the food they eat, the water they drink, the medicines they have, the clothes they wear, and the land is not very immediate to them. So majority of young people these days in urban areas are not really worried about land degradation as an issue. It doesn't get that type of attention climate change or biodiversity get. So the fact that young people are involved in this is very good. Now this then brings to the question of what can you do about it. On one side, when there is space and when it's appropriate, you can do tree planting, etc. And Mongolia certainly have opportunity for that. That you have vast amount of land, there are many areas which are degraded, and many areas where planting trees may be most appropriate thing to do. It's also possible that in some places people have done the wrong thing. You have planted the wrong tree. So in some time even removing tree is a act of land restoration because these people always see planting is the only right thing to do. Now sometimes you actually have removal of trees also as an appropriate land restoration action. But more importantly for a country like Mongolia where you have millions of people in cities, making them thoughtful as to how their consumption is causing land degradation, either in Mongolia or in another country, this is very critical. What you choose to buy may impact on whether land is degraded or restored. So creating that awareness of the link between land and their lifestyle is very critical. And any action which young people do to bring that awareness is also very welcome.
That brings us to an essential part of any global effort, which is partnerships. The G20 Land Initiative emphasizes global partnerships. In your view, what kinds of partnerships are most critical to create real and lasting change?
First and foremost, we will partner with countries. Even though it's a G20 initiative, all countries are welcome to join the partnership. So we would definitely, and we are actually working with the government of Mongolia to be a formal partner to the G20 initiative. Because at the end of the day, government has the biggest lever to make changes. They can legislate changes. So government as a partner is absolutely critical. I already mentioned industry as a partner. Industry hold huge amount of resources. They hold huge amount of technical capacity. They have the creativity, and therefore getting industry to be a partner is very critical. What we also noticed is getting universities as a partner is very critical because universities create the technical expertise which are needed to do restoration. So people who work in the area of agriculture. This morning I was in your agricultural university here to talk to them. How can you train the new generation of agrologists coming on land restoration? People who are working in the sector of mining, which is a growing area in Mongolia. How do we train the new mining engineers on land restoration? We want to work with the Rangeland, fashion houses, all. And so creating that type of expertise is critical so that's a university partnership. But finally, and most importantly, we have to partner with schools. I mentioned already about connecting the linkages between land and people. When I grew up in a village, my connection with the land was very immediate. I could see where my food was grown. I could see where my water is coming from. But that link is now gone. So one of the partnerships which we are establishing is with schools in the world. So we are working with 10,000 schools in 100 countries where we will establish what we call a nature lab, where they can see how land is connected to their life. So children learn by seeing and doing. They can restore a plot of land, and by doing so, the lesson that our life is dependent upon our nature and lab is brought to them. So these are the key partnerships we think we must have to achieve land restoration.
Thank you. Building on that, what advice would you give to young Mongolians just starting out in this field?
There are many ways of engaging in land restoration. I mentioned about new jobs which will be created by land restoration. So, for example, Mongolia is starting on a mining journey. Mining would have issues of land degradation, and therefore land restoration would be needed. So if you are a mining engineer, if you also understand restoration, clearly you have employment opportunities in mining, which not only help the economy, but also create new opportunities for employment. You have rangeland, again, potential for restoration. So acquiring skills of restoration, I would say, is absolutely useful. I mentioned about the project we have about young people setting a business on land restoration. I would encourage young Mongolians thinking of a startup. The startup could be in artificial intelligence. The startup could be on Internet of Things. It could be on robotics. It could be on genetics. But think how it can be connected to land, because that's your biggest resource. So AI to identify the area where land restoration could be profitable. Internet of Things to monitor how land is being degraded. So you do your business, you make your money, but also serve the land and nature. That is another huge opportunity for young Mongolians.
Let's take a step back and reflect on the personal experiences that shaped this work. What moments or lessons in your career journey have shaped your approach to the environment in general, specifically land and resilience?
I was born in India, and I grew up in a village, and I was trained as a farmer. So when land and the linkage come naturally to me. Of course, then I got opportunity to be educated, and I did my PhD. I went to Brunei, which is an oil-producing country. And oil has been produced there since 1929. I joined in 1995. So they had many decades of experience of oil production. But that production had also caused some environmental challenges there. Now, working in an oil company, I had the resources available for me to fix some of it. And I had my farmer's instinct to work on it. So when the two are combined, the resources available, the technical knowledge which I have, and the farmer's heart, I could make very visible changes in the degraded land situation there. And that, I thought, was something which was very satisfying to do. Of course, in your work, you do a lot of things, but not everything gives the satisfaction at the end of the day that, yes, I have achieved something. And when I moved on to another country, Oman, there was a challenge of invasive species. And again, I could work with the technical experts to address that. So when I moved into the new job, it is these three things which help me. One is the very fundamental and close connection to land, which I had inherited because of where I was born. So that passion is very real and very personal. the technical expertise of doing restoration in multiple countries. That really helped. And finally, sitting in a big instrument like the United Nations, which has huge lever to work on, and G20 as a partner, which means the world is your landscape to operate. So now I have a very satisfying job to achieve 1 billion hectare of restoration in the next 15 years, and I'm looking forward to it.
Looking ahead and considering the momentum that we've discussed, what is your biggest hope for global land restoration by 2030?
There has been a number of land restoration initiatives in the past. Starting with the Bond Challenge in 2010, Land Degradation Neutrality Initiative by UNCCD in 2015, multiple commitments under the Convention for Biological Diversity, multiple commitments under the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, and the Great Green Wall of Africa, the Middle East Green Initiative, the AFR 100. So there is no shortage of initiatives. But when we look at the actual numbers, degradation is still continuing. And this is not good news. So my number one hope is that by 2030, the land degradation situation has at least stabilized, that there is no more land degradation than the land we are being restored. And if that baseline we achieve, then we have a foundation to build on to restore even more land, that by 2040 we proactively achieve this 1 billion hectare of restoration.
What is your vision for Mongolia's role in the world land restoration movement after COP17?
Procedurally speaking, Mongolia would inherit the presidency of the Conference of Parties during the COP. And from then till the next COP, COP18, which will come in 2 years, Mongolia will be the presidency of the Conference of Parties of the UNCCD, which is a very powerful position because then you have access to all the 197 parties to advocate for land restoration. So I am expecting that Mongolia will play a very leading role, not only in successfully implementing the COP, which I have no doubt, but having some very tangible outcomes on rangelands, on drought, on land restoration during the COP17. And then they will work with other countries, including the G20 countries, to operationalize those in countries which are struggling with issues of land restoration. The amount of energy which Mongolia has shown, the commitment, I am watching them since Ivory Coast, the COP15, which happened in Abidjan. I am seeing the Mongolian delegation. It's a small delegation, but the passion which they bring and the courage which they have shown to take up such a massive enterprise such as COP here, if they carry on that with that energy, I'm sure it's going to be a game-changing presidency from Mongolia.
Could you also please share a favorite proverb or saying from your own culture that gives you hope or perspective on environmental work?
You know, my philosophy on this topic of land degradation is to see it as a positive way to motivate people rather than scare people on land degradation, everything is going bad. There's a lot of negative stories going on. So the phrase we use in our team is a land of opportunities. So wasteland is not wasted land, it's a land of opportunities. It's an opportunity to build economy, it's an opportunity to build enterprise, it's an opportunity to create jobs, and to achieve sustainable development. So I would say a land of opportunities.
Thank you, Dr. Muralee Thummarukudy, for your time, your leadership, and your inspiring contributions to this global effort. This concludes our exclusive interview with Dr. Muralee Thummarukudy, Director of the G20 Global Land Initiative. This interview was brought to you by Mongolia Mongolian National News Agency. Thank you for your attention.